today's Journal, so I figured it had to be appropriate.
All right, I'm going to call to order the March 21st, 2004 meeting of the War Ethics Committee, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so the first order before we get into amendments and those other things is it is that time. We made it through a year. Very proud of y'all. And welcome to Carl, who's joining us. I think our first action is a chair election for the next year.
Would you like to continue?
So it's been swell. I had a couple thoughts that I wanted to bring up to the Ethics Committee. One, would it be better to have someone who isn't on another board or committee in town, or someone who doesn't have a day job, so you have more time for this? So I wanted to throw those out there, and we could talk about if there's concerns or what have.
I don't have any concerns about how you've been holding up. And,
Okay.
and honestly, without objection, I'm happy to continue with the setup that we have now, as long as you're willing to volunteer for it.
Anyone else willing, interested, ready to step up?
Congratulations.
Okay, all right, we'll do another year at this. All right, so the first regular business is.
Hang on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll make a
Hang on.
motion.
Oh, yeah, we should probably do that officially.
I will, I'll make a motion to, that Wendy should continue in her role of chair.
I will second.
Great. The one amendment I'd make is that Eileen keeps correcting me when I mess up, and then we're all good. But, so, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, just me. All right. All right, so to throw together a basic agenda, do we have any?
Wendy?
Yes, ma'am.
So the other, job would be secretary, and I am happy to step down. I
Oh.
actually would like to step down.
You'd like to step down, okay.
Just looking at what my life load is like for the
I hear
next
ya.
year. So,
Thank you for reminding me of that.
that's okay. It's not a tremendously difficult task, to be secretary for our group. It's just, when there is stuff to do, it needs to be done within that window.
fair.
And if anyone's interested in doing it, I'd be much appreciated. And you can look at the current minutes that are online to be able to understand the format.
Level of detail.
Yeah, and the
format,
level
sure.
of detail that we've used. So if there's anyone who's interested in doing it, I'd be happy to hand it over.
So if you're interested, it might be a good way to sort of
Right.
pull in, not to bully you in the first 5 minutes. or
Take
anything.
on that role as
Yeah.
you secretary,
Yes.
Yeah.
and then you just take minutes during the meetings, and then,
Yep, so what you'll do is keep the, basically sentences, you've probably seen some of our previous minutes, just the high-level conversations, not who said what, right? And then, or detailed, we have examples, we'll work through that. But you'll send a draft over, and then in the next meeting, we'll look at them, we'll make sure we don't have any amendments, we'll approve them. And then they get posted as a draft, and then when they finalize, they get replaced with a final.
and from what I recollect, when Eileen was talking about her roles, it's like all motions are written down.
Yes, so, for example, I'm about to write a note. We called to order at 6:04 PM. That our initial discussion was about electing a chair for this session, and that I nominated Wendy, that Luke seconded my nomination, and that we all voted unanimously to elect her.
Minus one abstain.
Yeah, so it's just about following, and what we can do is I'll do tonight's minutes,
Okay,
and I'll hand them to you,
and then I
and then
can
you
type them
can.
up.
Yep,
Type them up, send them to myself and Naomi, or just myself, and I can send it to Naomi, just so that they get posted as draft minutes. And
Okay.
then, when I send out the agenda next time, I can send out the minutes to everybody, and then, that's the big thing. And also, if we have, conversations, handouts, they're supposed to get tied to the minutes, so between you and I, we'll figure out how to bundle that up to get it to Naomi.
Okay.
That's pretty much it.
So-
So
We
congratulations.
just need a, you gotta
Need a
do
motion.
motion.
See, this is why I need people. All right, so we have a motion to approve Carl as our secretary.
Second?
Do we have a motion?
Oh, moved?
Okay, second?
Seconded.
Okay, any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Thank you, I appreciate it. I
Thank
mean,
you.
there- I have skills, but keeping minutes
Like I
is
said,
not
I'm
one of them.
retired, so I have-
Marvel at it.
Ample time to support.
Wendy, I'm gonna get his email.
Okay, oh, his where ethics
Yeah, I'm
email?
gonna get his Ware email. and
Okay.
I'll send you, you'll get a temporary password,
Okay,
and then you can log in, and then I gotta take Suzanne out and put you in the group.
okay.
So in the where ethics, if someone sends an email to, what's it called, ethics at where, it goes to everybody in the
Automatically
committee? Yeah,
distributes to the group.
right. So she'll get you added to
Even
that.
if, like when Wendy, if she has to reply to someone, it doesn't use your personal email, it will show Ware and
Yeah,
H.gov.
and we're only supposed to use the ethics email for communication between us.
Yes.
It's a good idea, if somebody puts a request,
No request?
right to know, thank you. It's been a month, my terms are all shot. Anyway, right to know request,
Okay,
and you've done your personal email, it can escalate to, they get access to everything that's in your personal email. So the more you can segregate your committee work from your personal work, it just makes a nice buffer. The other thing we did before, where the town gave us email, we all had, everybody except Eileen had a second email address from Google to just keep ourselves separate, but,
Okay.
you know. Okay, so, any other amendments to the agenda?
The only question I have, Carlos, how do you spell your last name?
Hallstrom, Hallstrom like in Michael.
Okay, thank you.
Any amendments? No? Okay, great. So the minutes got emailed out to everyone, I think yesterday. Do you all have a copy? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes, February 15th?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second?
Great. Any discussion, amendments? Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, good. Okay, so the town webpage is up and running. We're gonna get some of the FAQs and up there. Naomi's working on that. We now have Carl on it, which is great. There's a link in the middle for our page, which is awesome. I just wanna check in and see if people are able to use your email, you're having issues with it.
The Outlook? What you're talking about? I'll be completely honest, I have an Apple, so I don't have Outlook on there, and I have to go find an app to.
Oh,
put it
you
on
can
there.
go to the website.
There's an authenticator.
An
I can show
authenticator?
you after.
Okay.
Yeah, and so go ahead.
I'm a little confused. I thought we had an email account at the town.
We do,
You do.
but
What does Outlook have to do with anything?
so when you go to the web link, it's Outlook based. They use a Microsoft as an authenticator, so it uses Outlook to give us access to the mail. You don't have to use the software, but it's like Outlook 360, so it's a web address that's tied to Microsoft.
So if I don't use that, what am I going to get from, in terms of whatever it is that Naomi set up for us?
So it's an interesting question, right? Because what I used to do on the school board is I would forward it to my personal email account, so I didn't have to go onto that, but it's blocked, it seems like. You can't forward it, so the only way to get those emails is to go to the outlook.com or whatever it is website to get the email. So I don't know that you'll get it without going there. But that's good, though. I want to have some questions so that we can go back to the
Okay,
tech guy. So I take it it's not working for you yet, you haven't gone?
correct.
Okay, and Luke hasn't gone?
The last email that I have in that account is from January 26th.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't think there's anything that's been more recent
I did a test the other day, today.
Today?
today.
Yeah, I did a test because what I did is I put ethics at warenh.gov on the website to see if I could get the link to work.
Yeah, I didn't.
And you're not getting
She
it?
replied back, she was the only one.
Okay, So you're not getting your email, you two aren't set up, and Carl's going to get set up. So it's just me at this point, so if you write where ethics, I get it, it's fine. So what I've been communicating is out to the group, I write your where accounts, and then the last one I had from you, so I write Proton and keep.
Yep.
Yep. So I'll keep doing that until you tell me you're good. The one thing then, because you didn't get email, is we got an email saying you have to do this security training or else, right? And I work for Dow in security adjacent storage, so I was a little annoyed that I had to do security training, but I did it, and it was fine, so.
passed?
I passed first time. And if you had to do the training, you can do it at double speed, so you don't have to listen to them, but,
Was it like cybersecurity training?
Yeah.
Yep.
yep.
And then I get a reminder that I didn't do it.
It's that time of the year.
It is that time. All right, so, work in progress. How are the other committees doing with accepting the email? Do you have a lot of people using them yet?
So we've really done, you were our second guinea pig.
Okay,
Parks and Rec will be our third.
okay,
It's overwhelming to try to get everybody an email and everybody together. So Conservation's working well. You guys, I'll have to talk with him to see why it's not working.
yeah. My authenticator is not working, so I can only do it on my work computer, which is annoying. But if I go anywhere else, it says I can't log in,
Yeah.
so.
So what I was gonna do, because I had one of the conservation guys come in, I'll give you his phone number, because he got him within 2 seconds, he stood in my office and used it.
Okay,
So if anybody wants it, I'll just pass around the phone number. 'Cause
Okay.
He's willing to help anybody.
okay. Like if you have to change your password, you forget your password, you have to call
Yeah.
tech support. You can't do it online, which is what I do everywhere else, but it's locked down so that people won't come in and get our secret information, so. All right, the other thing, webpage, our forums are up there. We now have a link, Carl's on it. They'll be posting the FAQs and processes soon. Naomi's working on that.
Has Carl, has Carl been sworn in?
He was
Yes,
sworn
I
in,
was
yes.
sworn in by Maureen.
Yep, and he's signed the code of ethics, so he's
Yeah.
good now. Any other discussion around email or web pages, the webpage? Okay. Communications, I've had no mail this month. So the one ongoing topic is spring training, and on the last meeting, I said I'd take a stab at PowerPoint, and if I was really, really good, we'd be presenting today, but as working on it, I just felt like we're still in the draft phase, so what I'd like to do, if it's all right with y'all, is sort of step through this, how I would sort of present it, take notes if anything seems wrong or off or whatever, and we get to the end, we can just rip it apart. But I think the way I work, if we get big picture, here's what this is, then works better for me, if y'all are okay with that.
Sure.
So
All
you're
right.
gonna be the teacher with the students?
Be teacher, right. So, this is Aware Ethics 2024 training. What I'm gonna do is talk about some basic terms that we use, talk about our committee, what you should do if you have a concern, what happens if there's a complaint against you, and then just the high-level process, right? So the big terms we talk about on the ethics committee is ethics versus morals, and a code of ethics. When we first got together last year, one of our first action items was to define ethics, and what we clearly realized is everybody has a sense of what that is, but there's no consensus across the world, and we could have spent the next 10 years working on what that means. So from a high-level perspective, the ethics is what the community comes together to decide what is right and wrong, whereas morals are your personal sense of what is right and wrong. So the way that we define what the community thinks is right and wrong typically is you have a code of ethics. And where the voters approved the code of ethics in March of 2006. That code of ethics applies to employees, elected officials, and committee members, all of whom, when they join the WARE community, they sign the code of ethics that they understand it. The code of ethics has major tenets around responsibility, fairness, respect, honesty, and the handling of confidential information, There's a link on here. So the Ware Ethics Committee's charter is to implement the Ware Code of Ethics as approved by the voters. We are comprised of 5 residents who are all elected. Our main charters are providing education, advice around inquiries. We can also give written advisories. We have a process to hear complaints, and then we can give recommendations to other committees, managers, and the Board of Selectmen. We have limited power, however. We can't import penalties, we can't get somebody fired.
Shouldn't that be
we can't-
imposed?
Yeah, you're gonna hold on to that for a minute, thank you. Just take a note, but you're right. I'll just get distracted, but, so yeah, we can't impose penalties, we can't fire somebody, we can't kick somebody out of town, steal their dog, whatever. And we can't overturn the ruling of another body in the town. We have a webpage, for more information. I have a picture of the webpage on the next slide, and basically, for those who are not familiar with the Town of Ware websites, if you go to our town boards and committee ethics, you'll find our page. On the left is all the forms and processes that we're talking about. In the middle is our board members, our terms, and our contact information on the left. There's a calendar for our next meeting, our agendas and our minutes. And I'm going really fast on purpose, just to sort of, so if you have a concern and you're not sure what to do, first of all, there's an FAQ page online, will be soon, and that has all this information. That's our source of truth. That's where this information came from. But when you have a concern, the first thing you need to consider, is it an inquiry or a complaint? Inquiries are anonymous questions with non-identifying information, something general like, is it ethical for someone to be on the 2 committees and Ware at the same time? It doesn't call anybody out, it's just a general ethics question, right? A complaint is something more specific. For example, is it ethical for Wendy to be on the John Stark Board and the Ethics Committee at the same time? Those are real, 2 easy black and whites, but the 90% of them sort of fall somewhere in the gray area, right? So figuring this out is an art. We're working on it with y'all. If you're not sure, you can reach out. For example, if someone said, is it ethical for someone to get hired to Centerwoods as a teacher if their spouse is a school board member? Now, first of all, school boards have a different process, so not a perfect example, but because all that is public information, it would be easy for anybody to figure out who you were talking about. So that sort of slides more into a complaint. But, okay, work in progress. If you're not sure, ask us. The second question is this really an ethic concern? Does that belong before us versus is it illegal or something else? And if so, if it's an ethical concern, does it fall under responsibility, fairness, respect, honesty, or confidential information? So if you know it's an inquiry and complaint, you know it's ethical, then you can fill out a form. The forms are available online or in the town office. So I put a screenshot of the inquiry form. Inquiries being general in nature, being anonymous in nature, all you need to do is put your general information on here. You have to agree that you're a town official, board member, employee, or resident, that you've read the ethics code, and you believe this is a fair subject for us to talk about. And that's it. And you can drop it in the mail drop outside the town office or mail it to us. The complaint form has more information, right, because this is targeted, directed at someone, a specific action. So in that case, because there will be a hearing, we require your name and contact information, the person who this was directed at, what their position is, and what part of the ethics code you believe was violated. You'll give us as much information as you can, and tell us what you've done to address this before you came to us. And then all you have to do is agree that it was true, that you read the code, that you believe it is a fair subject for us to talk about, and that you'll cooperate with us on the investigation. So, someone put a complaint against you, what do you do? So I made some quick do's and don'ts, and I'm sure we'll tweak these. First do is just breathe. This is a process to resolve conflict. It's not somebody coming at you. We can't penalize you. We can't kick you out of town. And you do have an opportunity to share your perspective. Right? Then my second due recommendation is to consider it. Do you even recall this event? And if so, do you have a different perspective? Thirdly, there is always an option for you to opt out, to not participate in this process. We'll still have the hearing and we'll discuss it and investigate it, but you have the right to just step away and not participate. We hope that doesn't happen very often. And if you're going to participate, then you want to prepare for your hearing. Do you know what witnesses or evidence you might want to bring forward? And my personal don't is, we're a small town, don't reach out to the complainant and escalate it on yourself. Now that the process has started, let's just sort of work through the process. Super high-level process overview, and this, again, is in the FAQ. What'll happen is if an inquiry or complaint comes to us at our next meeting, we'll review it. We will either reject it outright because it doesn't meet the criteria. We may request more information in the case of a complaint, or we'll proceed. Then after that, for inquiries, if we're proceeding, we'll have a discussion, stream live. That discussion will be posted on YouTube, and we'll document it in the minutes. If it's a complaint, we move to the complaint process, which is more in-depth, as you would expect. Complaint process we'll do a pre-hearing, which is about sort of scheduling it, sizing the effort. We'll meet with the complainant and the responder separately, figure out if you've got a vacation coming up, how big this is likely to go, that sort of thing. And then we'll schedule a hearing. Hearing process is really in-depth. The process is ECP3. When that's posted, you might want to look at it. But when we get to that point, we'll step through anyone who is going through this. But we'll notice the meeting. We have rules about who can represent, what the roles of witnesses are, how we'll share evidence, what the burden of proof is. After the hearing, we'll have a discussion just among the committee members. Online, obviously, it's not we'll try to be as transparent as possible. And then the discussion and the ruling may or may not happen the day of the hearing, depending on timing and on whether we need more information. But once we have a ruling, those findings will go to the complainant, the responder, the overseeing body, and they will be published in the minutes. Phew, it's a 5-minute training. All right, Neil, let's go. I saw lots of notes. Thoughts?
This is an impressive effort, thank you.
Thank you.
Where did you anticipate this?
Right, because that's right, you weren't at the last meeting. So what we talked about is we may have a special training. We may go ask to present this to the Board of Selectmen. And then we have to figure out what to do next, right? Because there's so many people who need that training. Do we have a special night when we invite employees and committee members? Don't know.
So this is a training document? This is
Right.
not something you would put online?
Oh, we could.
Okay, you want some?
Yes, absolutely.
You
I saw
need
the
a-
first one was
you need a
imposed,
date
not,
You need a date on the first page.
sure.
I would also suggest numbering the pages.
Yep. Okay. That is very good. And it was impose, import, limited power to import penalties, yeah, impose, that's good.
In fact, I'm going to number the pages now.
Okay.
Because, and I'm calling the first page 1.
Okay. There's 3 that look the same, but when you present it, it just changes the text on the side, so it will look like, yeah.
You mean when you step through the PowerPoint, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. It just changes the text on the side, it's not like a bird.
Okay, then on page 14, next to last,
Next to last, okay. The process,
This one. And this is nitpicking, but
That's
it's
good.
designed
No.
for clarity.
Yep.
It should be reject or request more information or,
sure,
I don't know if you've spelled YouTube correctly. I don't know whether it's U, capital U, and space, and T, capital T, or, I just don't know.
Yep,
But
I'll
that's-
check.
I don't think it's U hyphen tube, as you've done it here. And on 15, again, burden of proof, the P should be lowercase.
okay,
After discussion, you should say among committee members.
yep,
Instead of ruling, it's a finding,
okay,
and then findings distributed.
great, so then,
And on the opposite
pre-hearing,
column,
yep,
pre-hearing, meet not individually, meet separately.
Separately.
I think that's what you meant.
yeah, that works.
That's it.
And then they imposed from the previous page.
Yep.
Yep, okay,
Oh, and the findings distributed, the D also is lowercase.
okay. Gotcha. All right. Anybody else have changes, thoughts?
First off, I agree with Neil. It's an excellent effort. I appreciate the work. The only thing that I would like to see more of is an actual, what is the ethics code of where? You have
Okay.
a place where you address that we have one.
Yep.
And then you point them to it. But I think,
I could put the page on there and we could talk.
yeah,
in
I
more
think
detail.
being
Yeah.
able to go over the actual code
That's a good, sure.
within the training would be helpful.
I think probably on page 3, there's a spot.
On 3,
Yep.
what, our ethics? Or,
It
No.
says terms.
Terms.
oh,
Yeah.
right, but there's also a page that says
for
code of ethics.
And so the next page should be the actual code of ethics, so we can talk to it.
I see.
Yep, that's good. It's funny, I was walking on that this afternoon, so,
On page 5, you have the link to Code of Ethics.
Yep.
Do you want to put it just after that, or?
yes, right after that, I'll put a page like I did with those other forms, and I might change, I might change the formatting, the look and feel of the inquiry form, so that you can actually see the form bigger. But we should talk to the Code of Ethics and probably talk through those, like I mentioned the 5 tenets, but maybe we should just actually read the entire Code of Ethics
I
as part of the
think
training.
so. It's relatively short and it is the
Yep.
fundamental document, so.
Yep.
I think that's,
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Would it fit? Like
I think
to,
it's gonna take a page of its own.
yeah. So do you think in between 5 and 6?
Yes,
So like
Yeah, yeah.
5A?
5A, yep. Yep, but I agree, that's a big part of what we're doing, right? So if we use that opportunity to make sure people actually see it and we read through, totally makes sense.
Now, if this is gonna be a training document. And there's a group of people out there, and and they all have a copy of the Code of Ethics. There are going to be all sorts of questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? How are you going to handle it?
Right, so, that's a good question. I mean, there's several ways. We can do it if we're gonna deep dive the Code of Ethics, we could do it there, or we could do it at the end of the presentation. What do you think?
so what my suggestion would be to have to sort of think about this in sections and have a question at the end of each appropriate division so that people
have
aren't
one
holding
about-
until the end.
Like the Code of Ethics, have one about the.
Right, any questions
yep,
before we
yep.
move on to the next subject? Any questions?
Yep.
And that way you ferret them out early.
So, yep,
My concern is that if there's a question,
Mm-hmm.
there may be diverse answers from members of the committee.
sure.
You're assuming that the whole committee would be presenting this?
I assumed that, yes.
I did not, but, I mean, again, that's obviously something we'll have to discuss.
Right, no,
But regardless of whether it's presented by one person or others, in fact, there are 5 different presentations, there probably will be 5 different answers to the questions about what does section 1 mean, what does section 2 mean, and so forth. We haven't had any cases, so we haven't, as a group, decided what anything means.
yep,
So how do we handle that if Luke is doing training session 1, Eileen 2, Neil 3, And
Well, there's
they give
nothing,
different answers.
right? I mean, there's nothing in here that's not already on the FAQ, right? So now you're just talking basically the opinion of the person presenting it, how they handle those things,
Right.
right? And that's a good question, right?
So wouldn't it be something as simple as saying, we're a committee and we reach our decisions through vote? And so I can't speak for the whole committee, however, I can give you my interpretation based on the question as I understand it right now. But as a caveat, any question would have to go before the full committee, and the information presented at the time might change the answer. So I'm gonna give
Or-
you the best answer I can right now.
Or the committee might decide differently from me on the same facts.
Right, right.
Right. And so actually, if it's one of those committee-type questions, that's an excellent inquiry that someone could send in so that we could discuss it.
Or can you just take their question and say, we'll get back to you, through their manager or supervisor, or through them individually, once we get that query?
If I were in the audience, I would find it very unhelpful. The teacher, the presenter can't even answer my question.
If it's a,
And I understand
right,
your.
I mean, if it's a
committee
simple
answer.
term, yeah, but you know how we can make simple things very complex, and you don't wanna steer somebody wrong and then say, oh, Carl said this, or Luke said that, and you guys aren't following it.
But I like Luke's approach, though. He says, I'm going to give you my answer.
Right.
My answer is subject to a veto by the committee. Basically, Luke would be saying, or I would be saying, that this is an indeterminate document. And a group of 5 people might vote one way, and a second group of 5 people might vote a different way. Which of course is one of the problems with a code of ethics. Or any kind of a code.
And jurisprudence in general, to be fair.
Exactly, it's not exact, it's not specific,
It's set in
because
stone, it's fluid.
It's a
because the
commit-
situations vary and people's opinion varies. So it might be a 3-2 decision on any particular issue, because there's 2 people who feel one way and 3 people who feel another way. Again, that's one of the difficulties, as Luke said, with jurisprudence in general, because it's rare that people are so farsighted that they can speak very specifically about a whole variety of incidents and come up with a common answer to this infinite variety.
But we're still gonna capture the question in our reply, right, for all these sessions, these questions are.
Well, one of the things, of course, Luke might do is to say, I have an opinion, but, and I'll give you my opinion, but let me chat with the committee and see if,
Well, what I would say, honestly, is I can give you my opinion today, but it turns out we have a form for inquiries
Exactly.
to get a definition from the committee, and that's what I would point them towards. Because then you're getting an answer from the entire committee through the official channel. That's why we have that form in there.
I understood maybe I misunderstood the question. I understood Neil's question as, so if we're doing a training about what is this and what is the code of ethics, and somebody says, well, you tell me what ethical means, Eileen, meaning what is ethical, right? How are you defining ethics based on this code? It's a discussion about how every situation is nuanced, which is why it makes ethics difficult. And that I could give you my determination, but I'm pretty sure, actually, I'm almost certain that it's going to be a different viewpoint from every other member of the committee, which is why you have an elected committee with 5 very diverse opinions that come to each situation, look at all the facts that are presented to us, and make the best decision that we can make at that time.
Could you write that down?
That was beautiful.
yeah, but do you realize how frustrating that is for people?
Sure.
Here's a
Well,
whole
yeah.
set of rules and we don't know what they mean.
Sure, but I mean, let's look at what's going on today, Neil, with any number of very important questions that people are very frustrated about. This is an ethics committee with relatively small impact. I think it's a way to start the process. Another thing that I would suggest is that through any education process, the one thing that you educate the most is the teachers.
Yes.
they will learn, we will learn as we're moving through this, where the holes in this are, and, you know, and if we get I would submit that if we get a series of questions that, you know, maybe we start saying, look, we're going to suggest a different way to resolve questions. If that's a problem moving forward, we could say, rather than us trying to address them individually, because we don't have the full committee here, we don't have the benefit of a hearing or a discussion, maybe we have asked them to submit to the instructor, and then we'll summarize at the next committee meeting, something like that. But honestly, I don't, I would be surprised, in my experience doing classes, and I've done a boatload of them, how many people in these positions will be really anticipating with some, you know, positive, questions, that they're gonna come into this with a whole lot of, you know, digging around. What they wanna know is, how do I not trip over this?
Right.
How do I not have to talk to my boss or somebody else? And that's, you know, that's just, I think the basics is gonna be, hey, we have a code, here it is, let's talk about it. But I think it's gonna be pretty straightforward, and I think after the first sessions, we can, and I think we should build that into the process, that we come back and review after a certain period, how we adapt.
Are we gonna put the frequency, you know, the FAQs into this body that we already have?
The FAQ is a document that Eileen put together, which is very good, and it's gonna be on our website shortly, and so that's where all this content came from, was from the FAQ, so there'll be a link, and maybe I'll put a references page at the end that has the links to all the individual documents.
'Cause I was just thinking, if you go through the training session, then show them the frequently asked questions, they might have that question, oh, this already, my answer's already there, and I'm not gonna
Yep.
stall the audience or.
Well, the
take
flip
away-
side, if it's a question we don't have in our FAQ, we'll review it and add it.
But what we're doing here in the FAQs is not talking about ethics, it's talking about process.
Right.
So is it your thought that this training would be done by all 5 of us as a committee, or by individuals?
Right. I know, because you weren't at the last meeting. So what we talked about is someone or a subset of us can go and present it to the Board of Selectmen to show them what we've done and where we're at. And at which point, based on that feedback, then we figure out what the next thing is. If we do it as a part of our regular meeting, I think something we do on the school board is you break it down by sections, and each person presents part of it so that you're owning what we're doing as a group. That's something we can do.
But getting back to, despite what Luke said, certainly if I were in the audience, I would be asking some very specific ethical questions. What does it mean in my job? And if the 5 of us are together, how are we going to deal with that?
We can choose, right? I mean, we can choose to, if it's a quick thing, we could, after this is over, we could keep a list of those inquiries at the end, or we could say that we'll talk about them at our next meeting. I don't know, what do you guys think?
I think it depends on the nature of the question. If it's
Yeah.
something that's never come up, we would say something to the effect of, this has never come up, we'd have to discuss it. If it's something that we have discussed, it's easy, you know, but I don't know that we can anticipate every question.
So, getting back to the process, is it the intent of this education session, this training, just to deal with process? Or is it the intent also to explain the code when people, these people who are attending, ask, what does this section of the code mean?
If
From
I
my
rec-
job, blah, blah, blah.
If I recall, what we discussed last time was, this is just the basic, we're Ethics Committee 101 for the first time through. I don't think we intended to go into what is ethics and what is the nuances of these ethics. Is that your perspective?
I think that we can talk about, as you've outlined here, we have an ethics code. We can talk a little bit about these broad definitions, but once it gets into things that we haven't decided as a group, we would
Right.
just simply have to say that. Again, I can give you my opinion, this is America still, we can still speak freely so far. And here's my opinion, but I'm gonna have to refer this back to, you know, I could refer it to the group, or you could refer it to the group, or this is how we have these, you know, these inquiries answered, because, again, what I want to avoid is having someone be, I don't wanna say trapped, that's not the word, but cornered into answering a question or being held accountable to a question that was answered in a classroom setting without the benefit of a full discussion with the committee and without the benefit of all of the information that would come through the inquiry process.
Right.
Then
So-
it would be very advisable for these presentations not to be done by the full committee.
I agree. I don't think we should have a committee meeting at the training. I think that would be very unproductive. I think it'd be counterproductive. People don't want to, you know, be present. If they wanted to be there, they'd be sitting right here.
Right.
Right? But our job in these education sessions isn't to have a committee meeting.
Right.
It's to pass on what we've agreed to, and then if there's feedback to the committee, to bring it back. I assume those people that were doing the presentation would capture what those were and bring it back to the full committee for action or no action.
As an aside, you know, I've done sexual harassment and hostile work environment training for years, and where you're talking about process. You're talking about the policies and statutes that exist, and then you're talking about the process of filing a report or, and I've been in front of groups of people where they've, you know, been like, well, so Eileen, you know, if this happens, then, and I'm like, I'm gonna stop you. This is education. That this is not the place where you would file a complaint or, you know, make that kind of a statement, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that, you know, there's a process and I want to respect that process. And so, what the purpose of this session is to provide you some information about how you would go about getting a question answered or go about getting some more information about something that you suspect or that you're considering might be an ethical concern. But this wouldn't be the venue to do it. Right, so it's the differentiation between
Process and substance.
process
Yeah.
and substance.
That certainly would eliminate a lot of the concerns that I would have if this turned into that. So if that kind of question comes up, your answer is very appropriate, and Luke's response also would be very helpful. That is to say, I can give you my opinion, but this is a committee decision, and my opinion really isn't going to be helpful.
Right. And, you know, maybe clarifying the title to be like we're in ethics processes, we're, you know, and then when we communicate that we're doing it, we're gonna talk about, you know, basically, our process and what you need to do if you have a concern or a concern comes against you.
Should we in some way, either in the title or throughout the document, indicate that this is really focusing on process?
Yes,
and-
exactly. That's what I was saying, maybe. And if someone has a title suggestion, by all means, let me know.
I'm thinking about that part and where it says where in ethics, what I would suggest is saying something of like the town of Ware, or the code of ethics for the town of Ware, or informational training on the code of ethics for the town of Ware, that sort of thing, so that you know.
And just call it right from the front page, that this is,
But as soon as you say that, the first thing that came to my mind is they're going to explain to me what the code of ethics means. And I didn't even think about process. The first thing I thought about is, you're going to explain the code. This is what section 1 means, this is what section.
Sure, and so you could add, and the process
It-
for invocation, or something to that, yeah.
If the focus is on process, we really need to make sure the title reflects that, as well as, and maybe the title is on each page.
yep,
I'm not sure what the title would be, but Eileen's focus on process, and that's what this, education thing is about, is important. If we get questions from the audience and say, well, will you have training session on what the code means? We'll talk about that at another time.
right. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts on the title, or do you wanna work with me afterwards and come up with one? Do you have a thought?
Where in ethics,
Process,
the process,
the process,
the process for determining ethical violations or violations of the code or something like that.
I mean, are you gonna be putting flow charts in there too? You know how you had the yes, no, and which way you go?
I think we had some behind the scenes, because Eileen and I are flow chart people, so that's how I think, so,
Like a decision tree?
yeah.
It was a decision tree, like if it meets
Love a
this, we
decision
go down
tree.
here, we,
Yeah.
I thought we did some of those.
I saw
We
something.
never approved a flow chart.
I think I drew decision trees for myself to be able to understand what our process was gonna be. But I don't think we actually, and I think that the reason why, Carl, that we didn't get to like that level of specificity that I wanted to get to, is because, you know, this isn't necessarily linear, unfortunately. That, you know, it could be cyclic in nature, like you could, you know, be walking down a path and then go a completely different way. You might get kicked back by us, you know, if you come in with something and it's not written in a way that we can, I don't want to say talk about, because that's not accurate, but if it's written, what was the phrase? I thought about this the other day when I was looking at some of the stuff Wendy sent. To be very specifically vague, was that the?
Right,
Was
for
that the?
inquiries, yeah, specifically vague.
So, you know, trying to, when we were asking about, when we were working on the process, it took us a very long time, to get to a place where we would be able to structure this appropriately so that people could get their questions answered in a way, but that if it went from like advisory to, you know, like written opinion, that we were specific enough. So that's where that decision tree became like a series of pointed arrows that went back and forth, and it just got complicated, so.
I have a title.
Okay.
Where in ethics, the process, underline the word process, for resolving ethical issues.
Would you also add that it's also gonna show them the website, giving them over, you know, showing them, you know, the website overview too? I mean, we're kind of showing where everything is. Instead of them just filling out a form every year or
Right,
looking at 2 pages, now it's say, you go to this website, here's a lot of information for you to look at. Whenever you might have a question or just wanna know
right.
what's going on in the town of Ware.
And Wendy, I would put the process for resolving ethical issues on the top of each page.
Right, yeah, I got that,
So that-
header,
Yeah, a header, exactly.
yep.
Are you gonna
That
do
would
your own
keep the
edits on
focus.
this one?
Say what?
Are you gonna do your own edits on this one?
I was planning on it, but
Okay.
if,
No, because I'll hand you my doc.
Yeah.
If you want, if that's helpful to you.
sure, if you got some more thoughts.
I've been taking copious notes on
Oh,
it
good.
for you.
I love you, you're awesome. Good, because, you know, this is my handwriting, and so I write something, I might not be able to read it tomorrow, and I know you're.
This is why I did not step up. for that.
And I heard from an earlier thing, we can't read your writing.
Yeah, that's true, nobody can read my writing.
And so is that an argument in favor of not teaching cursive?
I learned cursive,
Exactly.
yeah, oh, so you think it'd be neater if, I think it's a reason why we shouldn't type everything, because I'm typing, I don't ever write anything, I don't even write a check anymore, everything's electronic, right?
Do you know what font you used?
No. I started with Arial, and then I picked a design doc, and it changed everything around.
Yeah, because that was the only, you know, my edits were more like, you know, font size.
Yep.
That sort of thing.
Yep.
So if you want to edit the substance
Content,
and,
and then you make it
I can,
better?
I can go
Yeah.
back in if you'd like.
That would be
just
great,
to,
because those are
um,
the things, I see big pictures, I don't see the little
Yeah.
things, like, I have, because I'm a software developer, I do web pages and design for work, and then I had this guy who would say, you have an extra space there. I'm like, I don't see it. I can look at it and I don't see it. So, yeah, if you have those skills, that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, I can go in after and just,
Yep.
because I liked the font that you used up top.
Okay,
Like, I really like that. I
Okay.
just was looking at the body, and I think there.
it changed,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's like 3 or 4 different fonts and
Yeah, yeah.
sizes in here that I wanna
Yep.
get to a place that are consistent.
I'll love it. Great, so what I'll do is I'll, probably tomorrow, I'm writing code, so maybe next week, but I'll take all these notes before I forget them and make the changes, and I'll send it over to you.
Do you want?
Yeah, you don't need the Wendy's font is messy?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Good, anything else we wanna talk about with training, timeline, or,
So, when is our next meeting?
the 18th of April,
18th of April, okay.
and then
Oh,
like,
and we're starting spring training now, or?
for,
Well, the Red Sox are.
Well,
in a few
spring
days,
doesn't
I don't
start
know
till,
about us.
what, tomorrow? Is it like tomorrow, day
it's
after?
pretty soon, we're ahead of the game.
So how many,
Oh, no, it's today.
how many people, let's talk logistics for a moment.
Happy spring.
So, how many people do we have to educate?
That's a great question.
How many town employees are there? About 50
6.
total?
Well, and that's the question, is
Right,
we're
that's
supposed to
what it is.
provide training, are we supposed to provide, are we supposed to do training for all the employees, the elected officials and committee members? Or are we
Yes.
supposed to make it available? No?
Well, I mean, provide training is a pretty broad
Yeah.
description. And I think that's one of the next things we have to talk about is how do we divide this up? What's the format? When, are we- you mentioned earlier, we're gonna do stuff at night. I suspect the town would object to having their employees on overtime for this.
Right.
So we're gonna have to accommodate, trainings that, who can do what when. And
I'm retired, I can go anytime. If they
Me
need
too.
somebody for a morning meeting,
same
and they
here.
get together as like a shop, all getting together at the Public Works Department, and
Yep.
present it before they start their work day, instead of waiting till nighttime and doing overtime, so that.
How long do you think this presentation would be?
Longer than I did today, obviously, because I was rushing through it, but,
Would this take an hour, 2 hours?
no, not
No,
2 hours,
It shouldn't,
half hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say a half hour with the presentation and maybe add another half hour if you get a really engaged and questioning group, but I suspect it would be mostly 10 minutes.
Can I add one thing before you do the training? I think you should get it out to the group first, so they can see everything. So when we go to present to them, it's not cold turkey, it's not like, oh, you just hit me with this wave of information.
Yep.
And how am I supposed, if you can get it out to the different groups ahead of time, they can get it through their emails, they can look at it, and then they can come all
Naomi?
prepared.
And this is I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure that you have,
You can't be both.
Sexual harassment
I
training.
can though, that you have a certain trainings are mandatory, right? And that you have a sign off, like,
The read and review file.
I spent my day updating our performance evaluation process, and I have a front sheet of all of the required training that has to be done, the policies that have to be read, everything that has to happen to package up a performance evaluation and send it off. So, do you guys have like training days?
Well, so Primex has gone to virtual,
Yep.
so, they used to come here and do the harassment training.
Yep. Because that usually has to be done, like, yeah.
That's the only one that I ever have to do. I am gonna talk about the First Amendment training, so,
Did everyone attend that?
we're supposed to.
So if they're online, can people just do it from wherever they're at, or do you, okay. Which is another thing, is if we tape this, we can make that training virtual available. It doesn't allow for questions, but, I just think as 5 volunteers, I don't know if we're gonna be able to do 20 different trainings.
So I think some of these things will will resolve as we move forward, because we'll start to be able to talk about, can we do a group? You know, they don't all have to, we don't have to go in and say, well, only the people from this department can be here today. We could, you know, work with the administrator and say, okay, what's the best days for us to be available, and talk amongst ourselves about fitting it.
And Wednesday's police department, because they're all there on Wednesday.
There you go. So I think, you know, that's gonna be a learning experience for us, is how to manage that. And I think also, one of the other things we ought to talk about is how do we, you know, how do we get this into the supervisor's thought process for each of those, you know, departments? I'm not sure how it's structured, such that they know, all right, we've got this training coming up, you know, as Carl said, that the folks have access to the information in advance, and that they understand. It's so much more effective when the supervisor is telling them, I have an expectation that you're gonna go and, you know, and fully attend or be involved in this, as opposed to go, hey, here's something we have to sign off on, that sort of thing. But anyway, I just think we're gonna need to talk about how do we do that as a committee? Do we coordinate that through the selectman's office? I don't know the answer to that.
Can we explore a little bit more about making a video or some sort of a presentation that individuals throughout the town, both committees and employees, could, on their own time or during work or however it's done, take advantage of, so that we didn't have to do the individual training sessions. If we're focusing on process, we probably ought to make some availability to answer any questions, but certainly that would solve some of the problems we were talking about before in terms of substance. I guess, and Eileen has the experience, but I guess if you did something like that, not everybody would take advantage of it.
Sure.
But that's not desirable, but it's understandable. So does that work?
In my experience, it is the less desirable way to present training, simply because you will have a component of people who just turn on the recording and let it time out while they're doing something else entirely, especially if it's an annual presentation. So one of the things, actually, my wife and I were discussing, she had to go through one of these annual, I think it was a HAZWalk, or anyway, hazardous material training or something. And if you went to the class and sat in with the state, there's no requirement for review at the end of the session. If you do it at home, you had to do a 15-question quiz, just to confirm that you were actually present while it was happening. Because obviously, you go in a classroom setting, the instructor can see who's engaged or not to a relative degree. You can't do that with all online. And I think in the initial rollout, one of the most valuable benefits of training is the feedback you get from it. And you're not going to get the same quality of feedback if you're doing it online, especially in the first year when we're doing the formative part of this. So my advice would be, consider the video parts and the totally or the more electronic presentations for further downstream, when you've polished your presentation and you feel confident that people can get what we need them to get from that. Because we're just guessing right now up front, good guesses, but we're just guessing how it's going to be received and whether or not, and that's something else that we need to consider as educators here is what are the key points of information we want them to come away with? And that has to, and then how do we measure that? That's the second piece. How do you measure that they got what you need them to get? Is it a quiz? Is it, we don't care, we just checked the box and said we presented it, therefore we threw the ball, if you catch it, that's your...
So devil's advocate, if people want to just completely skip through it, not do it, not just run it and be in the other room, so what? Like, we want people to understand this because we're passionate about it, because we're giving up our time to make this happen. But if I am working in the town office and I just think this whole thing is silly, our forcing them to sit through it isn't gonna change that, right? So I don't know.
It may not change their attitude, but it would certainly change the appearance of the importance of the issue to the officials in town, whoever that is, their supervisor, the select board, whoever that is. If we, the more the more we underscore the importance of this and the why are we doing ethics training? Why is that important to me? I think the more they're going to, come away with at least some value, or at least be open to listening to it. But there is always going to be that component that, so what? I don't need you to lecture me on ethics, blah, blah, blah. And again, we didn't make the requirement that the
Right.
town employees sign off on this. The town did.
To sign off on it, but not to do
What's a
training.
sign
Right.
off? Tell me about signing off.
You have to sign the code of ethics if you're elected or if you're an employee.
So what,
Right, but that's signing the code. That
Right.
doesn't
what
mean you
I'm,
understand it or.
all I'm suggesting is they acknowledge there's a code and it applies to them in advance. And that what
Exactly.
we're coming in to do is to say, you have already signed something that says you acknowledge and that you will abide by these terms, and we're here to help you understand what that means.
No, we're not. That's not what this does.
This tells you the
This is
process.
process only, and indeed, one could make the argument that this does not fulfill the statutory obligation
We're
to
not here-
educate.
I think you're making a distinction between process and education that I'm not making, but that's okay. What I'm saying is that we have some information that we are obligated to provide them, right? We're here to provide that information.
I'm thinking about what was done in 2006, where it said we were supposed to educate. If I had been writing it at that time, educate to me would mean talking about what the code of ethics means and what ethical situations are and so forth. We are not doing any of that. We've clearly decided that what we're doing is educating people on process and not on what the code means.
All right, I'm not,
Do you understand?
I understand what you're saying, I don't agree with it, because I do think that you can't say, that we're not saying what the code means at all. What we're saying is, we're not going to go into an education session and adjudicate a single question with two people from the committee to do a hearing, because this isn't the place to do it.
And we're not even going in and saying, here are a couple of situations as examples of ethical and unethical
No,
behavior under the
we
code.
haven't, that's not in here, there's not a single example.
That's
that
my
we're-
point.
Right, so, but we are saying, here's a code, this is what it says.
No, yes, but it's like giving people a copy of the Constitution and not having any discussion about what the First Amendment means. If you wanted to educate people about the Constitution, you can't simply give them the Constitution and talk about the judicial system and the process by which you go through court to challenge a particular section or to determine whether one of your actions is a violation of a particular part of the Constitution.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, but to be fair, I think when, I don't have it in front of me anymore because I gave mine to Wendy.
Which one, the
but-
code of ethics, oh, the
But
slides?
Wendy did a very fast, high-level cruise through. But I forgot what slide it is. There's a section where she talks about the tenets of the code of ethics, and that we're gonna go through the code of ethics. I imagine, that we are gonna have a discussion about what the code of ethics is, and that we will read from the code of ethics what those tenets are.
Right.
How you interpret, right? That's where the rubber meets the road on this, right? How you interpret is the other, the question that you pose. So somebody's like, asking a scenario-based question at our training, then we would defer to, we're not gonna get into specifics here,
Right.
right? But we are gonna discuss what the code is, what the tenets are.
we are going to do that?
Yes.
That was my
Yeah,
understanding.
we just said we're gonna make an extra page, we're gonna have the code of ethics on it, and
Yeah.
we're gonna read through it.
And
But
I forgot what
Reading
slide
through
it was.
Right.
It's in there that she talks about the tenets
The
of the
tenants,
code.
responsibility,
Yep.
fairness, respect,
Respect.
honesty, and
Yep.
handling confidential information.
Yep.
Yeah, so she just went high level in our discussion, so that's the difference, that's the other 25 minutes, when I say 30-minute presentation and she did it in 5, right? Like, it's actually getting in a little bit into it, not into the weeds so much that you'd be having scenario-based conversations, but that we are gonna discuss what the code is and what the tenets are and,
Right. And I think the code of ethics is pretty clear. I
right?
mean,
Like, that was my understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's a both end. what you two are discussing.
Right, I will not use my office or the resources of the town for personal political gain of myself, my family, my friends, or associates. That's clear, right? The reason we're here is because what's your definition of friends? What's your definition of family?
Yes.
What's an associate? When do we get to that point,
What's misuse?
right? And so, the code of ethics as written, I think is really good.
I promote consistency, equity, and non-discrimination in public agency decision-making, which I base upon the merits of an issue, including facts, research, reasoned opinions, et cetera. And simply reading that is education?
If they didn't know it was there, yes.
So the process is you figure out which one of these tenants fits your particular issue. So if you know what those the list is, then you know where you think that's coming from.
And
Well, certainly, one concept of education is simply to read the Constitution, the code.
But there's another part of this, and that is just the discussion on the squishiness of these terms,
I'd say,
right? Fairness, we're not gonna get up there and define fairness for anyone, and I think that's a perfect opportunity to say, hey, you know, fairness is different to you than it is to me.
Right.
And going back to 5 people on the committee, it's gonna be different to those 5 than the individual, so.
you use words like fairness and equitable, right?
Right, fair and equitable treatment, what does that mean? It doesn't mean
But what we
equal
don't want to
treatment.
go into training and have to define that for a particular.
Well, and you
particular
can't,
day.
you
Right.
can't without knowing so many particulars about the exact issue at hand, which is a great segue to say to them, again, we're not here today to give you, to your, point, we're not here today to say this is ethical and this is not ethical, absolutely. Because there is no such situation, because we don't have all of the information, and, that would be the end of a hearing process. We're here to say, here's how we get to that point if we need to. And here are the processes we have built in to hopefully handle this at the lowest possible level with the least amount of friction. That's really,
Here's what to expect if you're involved in one.
right, here's the process, here's what to expect, here's what your role would be if you're the person with a concern, or the person who, against whom a concern was lodged.
Right.
And then take it from there. We may, as I said, I would hope we're modifying this significantly after the first year.
Of course, and I think that we talked about last time, and I think a time before that, we're not trying to boil the ocean. Our first training was gonna be the basics of what
Yep.
we have and what you do if you have a concern.
And see what they
And then,
need.
once you've got the majority of the people that understand that piece, that gets out there. We've had some more hearings, we've had some complaints over the next year. Then by the time we get to the next spring, then building onto that training body.
Putting aside the issues that I raised, because you have some sort of an answer for them. Can we discuss about how we're going to make these presentations? Whether they're going to be individual, whether we're going to do it online, whether we're going to, is attendance required, is attendance optional? How do we deal not just with the employees who work 9 to 5, so to speak, but how do we deal with all of the committees?
Sure.
And how is it reasonable, given the fact that we're volunteers? How is it reasonable for us to do this?
Well, that's why I was trying to get to the logistics, because I'm trying to define reasonable. So we know that we got a handful of employees. We have 1, 2, 3, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Departments? 5?
DPW, this building, library.
And then, how many boards, how many committees?
A lot, there's a lot on that list.
Well, how many are actually seated is the next question.
Well, they're, like,
Yeah.
I'm going through, I'd have to pull up the website, but I think it's 20.
Okay.
I think, right? So you're talking 25 presentations,
Maybe, unless you can combine it.
maybe.
Because
And
like the
5
town-
people.
Like the town, what we could do, like what I was talking about with the employees, we don't have to have, I mean, it makes sense with the police department, if they're all there on Wednesday, it's
Yep.
easy to do.
Yep.
But if you had a day where you're doing ethics training, you could do the same thing with the committees. You could say, we're going to do an ethics training on this night, and then we'll do another night, and any of the members from these committees, you know, are encouraged and required under the code to, at some point, attend, and we'll just start checking them off, then we have to chase them down. as you
So
always
looking
do.
at
Are
that,
they required to attend under the code?
Well, we're required to present.
We're
it to 'em.
we're
We're-
required to provide education, but.
Right.
so this is on the Ware Ethics Code implementation page, and I don't know if this was voted on or not voted on, but under education, it says, "The Ethics Committee shall hold a meeting each spring for newly elected or appointed officials, board members, and employees, so they can familiarize themselves with the provisions of the code." That's
only
the,
the new
that's
one.
the training requirement, right? So we
One
have,
time?
Well, so if
One
you
time
only
Once a
do it
year.
once a
Oh, once
year
a
for
year?
only the new employees.
that's what's on the implementation. It doesn't say educate the world on everything, right? So if that was the goal, that's not 25 trainings.
Well, does that mean no one gets trained the first year because they're all existing employees and we wait till next year to train only the new ones? I would hope we want to train current employees.
Reducto else.
What I'm saying is requirements versus goals, right? The requirement, as I read it, is a meeting.
Yep.
The goals, if we really want to present what we've worked on for a year, we want to do a board of selectmen, we want to make it available to whoever we want, we can have that discussion, but I think we're trying to find that line, right? So we don't want to do 25 meetings, but is one sufficient? And I was trying to give the boundaries there, but.
If we were to make a half-hour presentation, Eileen's number,
My ballpark.
to the Board of Selectmen as an agenda item at one of their meetings, and their meetings are televised, and some people, I don't know how many, but a number of people in town watch those meetings, either at the time they're going on or subsequently. Some of the people who watch are members of boards and probably town employees. That might cover a lot of people, a large number of people who are in one of the 25 groups you mentioned, if that were done. And because it's done to the selectmen, especially if that were the first one, it has a certain seriousness. The selectmen are making time out of their meeting to listen to this presentation because they too want to be educated. If we did that, and then we had 2 other sessions, optional, available, either attend in person, or, because this is televised, listen in, would we have accomplished, would we have made a significant but reasonable effort to educate in accordance with what you just read?
I would suggest that not in accordance with what was just read, because it suggests that in that first year, all employees would be new employees having not received the training at all. So that would mean in the first year, we would need to get everybody. In subsequent years, it would be individuals who had hired over the course of that next year, is the way it reads literally.
Is it?
But, are you suggesting that this training should be mandatory?
I'm suggesting that the ethics rules apply to all committee members and employees in the town. And if it applies to them and you're providing training and you don't make that training available to all of the people for whom it covers, then you're going to have plausible deniability on issues down the road.
Now, number 3, though, says it should be the responsibility of the supervisor of a new employee to ensure that new employee familiarizes themselves with the provisions of the code, right? So it's not our job to make sure everybody's read it, but we're gonna provide training to assist with that process.
In other words, if we provide 2 or 3 sessions and allow people to attend or not attend, have we fulfilled that? Is that a reasonable effort on our part to meet those requirements that you just read?
Do employees get paid to go?
That's a good question. We don't control payroll, right?
How does that work at the prison? when you have training?
If you ever require training that they have to do, and that
They
they
get
can be
paid.
held responsible for, they get paid.
So that would preclude an evening selectmen's meeting for town employees. You
In
couldn't-
person,
You couldn't.
like you could
Well,
watch it at
but,
work.
I mean, they could watch it at home, but you couldn't, like, use that to say, well, they signed off on it because they watched it at home on their time without incurring.
But the training is not required, right? That signing and that you understand the code of ethics is
Is
required,
required.
right? So,
So where does the requirement for the education come from? If it's not in the code itself, then this is just the 2006 committee's expectation of education?
I thought it was part of the original,
it's on the where ethics committee implementation page, is it?
But that's
That's
just the
that was
last.
adopted on May 14th, 2006.
Sure, and so, point being that we are the committee now, and we can, and it sounds like we may need to clarify what our expectations are around the education.
I think
I don't know that
actually-
we can make it mandatory, because
Yeah.
I don't think we're empowered to do that.
Well, and I think when it comes to employees, that's not our decision, that's a Board of Selectmen decision.
You mean, who gets it, or who needs it, or who has to have it?
Yeah,
Then,
that's a policy
And You're
decision.
gonna put the training on the webpage, correct?
Sure.
Then it's gonna be available to anybody, new or old, as far as an employee.
right.
And then I also asked that on our training, you still have a feedback form. You can get feedback on the training, where people say, I'd like to see this, or I
Sure.
don't need to see that. And that, it's always good to get feedback from the audience.
Absolutely.
And we can-
I'm with Luke a little bit, though, I gotta, having done training COVID, when you're training to a screen, which is like the worst feeling in the world, because you can't get any you're not being able to gauge feedback or interest, or engagement. So, my preference would always be to do it in person. But, I'm curious, to your point, so who set the guideline on this? Was it the former committee? Was that in response to something?
This was adopted by town meeting. The town voted.
So what did the warrant say?
Ware, the code implementation, the town of Ware has established an ethics committee. This was the effective date. This ordinance shall become effective 60 days after it's adopted by the voters of the town, and it was adopted on May 14th. It became effective on May 14th, 2 months after town meeting.
Was that the Article 28 from 2006?
I don't know what the number was.
I think it was Article 28.
It's entitled Ware Ethics Code Implementation.
Right, so
And so,
you're saying this was voted on
so
even,
this is a town ordinance. And the ordinance says, the Ethics Committee shall hold a meeting each spring for newly elected or appointed officials, board members, and employees so that they may familiarize themselves with the provisions of the code. Not the process, but the provisions of the code. It shall be the responsibility of any supervisor to make sure that they do that.
and that's to
so-
familiarize, not
so
to
the-
become experts on, right?
So the
it's-
only thing that the ordinance requires us to do is to hold a meeting each spring for newly elected or appointed officials, and we're assuming that for the first time, everyone is newly elected or appointed. We're making that judgment. So we meet the requirements of the ordinance simply by holding a meeting,
But there's something in there that worries me.
okay?
It talks about holding supervisors accountable, right?
With the provisions of the code, yep.
So that tells me that there's somebody in here who's accountable, that they need to understand this, right? And it doesn't say we're gonna hold the employees accountable, it doesn't say we're gonna, hold board or committee members or elected officials accountable, it says we're gonna hold supervisors accountable. Why supervisors got singled out and nobody else did is kinda curious to me. But,
Exactly, because with respect to committees, there is no supervisor.
no, and so the only group of people, and how many supervisors are there? There's the chief of police, there's the fire chief,
DPW.
there's the DPW director, there's the
Town
town
office.
administrator, there is the librarian, yeah,
Town clerk?
right? So you've got six or seven people who are actually responsible for this. What does it
I'm
mean?
responsible for everybody here.
Yeah. So what is it?
Maureen's not responsible for Pam, I am.
Interesting.
She's an elected official and she's not responsible?
I didn't say she wasn't responsible.
I mean, for this
She's not
training.
responsible for her coworker, I am.
She's not the supervisor.
Oh,
She's an elected official, which makes sense, right? You don't want elected officials supervising employees.
how can she not supervise her deputy? Well, that's a separate issue.
So there is a group of people who it's in their vested interest to understand this.
Yeah, they get this training one-on-one or,
So that group of people, I would strongly recommend attend.
Well, let's assume that we make a presentation to the selectmen.
Sure.
Okay? And that's recorded. Would a supervisor be fulfilling his or her obligation if he made sure that each employee on company time watched that?
You tell me.
I would think that would suffice.
Every time we look at the implementation or what was voted on, all the words are so vague. So familiarize means, I know there's 5 tenants, I know that there's things about don't share confidential information. It doesn't mean I can tell you any action I do, whether it's ethical or not.
You need to understand that there's a process. You need to understand where the information about the process is. And you need to understand, it's basically to have a working knowledge.
And with the provision of the codes, too.
Yes.
Not just the process.
Yep.
And I think we, as the current committee, need to establish for ourselves what level we are comfortable with. Are we comfortable with the bare minimum of meeting the language requirements, or is there something else we have in mind? So a higher level of satisfying the need, as it were.
Well, I would argue that if we're gonna talk about what the process is and what you need to do if you have a complaint or there's a complaint against you, that's more than what's here. So we're already going above that. And making sure we step through and speak to the code of ethics, that meets that need, right?
agree.
But I don't know that we're there yet, that we can tell supervisors, this is how you make sure your employees familiarize themselves.
Oh, no,
Right.
and
That's not
I
our
would,
job.
Right.
I would not suggest that it is our responsibility to tell the supervisors how to familiarize their employees with the ethics code. I think our job is to present the information to whoever the audience is in the same fashion, and
Right.
let them make that assessment.
If there is a video of our presentation, a 30-minute video,
Yep.
and that is readily available to any supervisor and any town employee and any committee member, have we fulfilled our responsibility in a reasonable manner?
Sure, so to Luke's point, though, I think if we end with, we would be glad to meet with any, if there's a committee or supervisor who would like
A presentation.
presentation, to reach out to us, right? So we're not just saying, this is it, we're done, we're walking away, and screw y'all.
I have, yes. But I would hate for the first one to be the one. And I say that, you know what I mean?
Yes.
That, you want that one to be the one? What if it's terrible?
Right, and that one's gonna be the most, that one's gonna be the most seen by people that aren't even
What
one
if
of
it's
our
terrible?
people, right?
So what you're saying is, before we go before the selectmen, we should have a dry run?
Yes.
Or a
Yes.
real run?
Well, or a couple, and modify and be ready to say, before you break out the recording equipment, that we have something worthy of recording.
Yes.
Yes.
Because the worst thing you can do is put up something that's, either
Yep.
isn't engaging, or is misinformation, or stops and starts, or there's confusion. We're
Agreed.
done.
Yep.
So I would put that downstream a little bit, the whole recording thing, and I don't think it's problematic, honestly, to start with the selectmen, because I think it's fair to say to them, you're the primary recipient of this.
I
Need to,
But by
I
nature,
don't
it'll
want
be,
to start with the selectmen. I think Eileen's absolutely right. I think the selectmen's presentation should be the ultimate.
It'll be recorded, that's
Well,
why.
And it
assuming,
will be-
assuming you do it at the selectmen committee meeting.
Yes.
There's no requirement that we do that. Right, so
If-
far, we've
if they're-
assumed that we're doing
if
it
they're-
at the meeting.
If they're there, it's a meeting, and if it's a meeting, it's recorded. So, if
If they're
more
there,
than two selectmen are together.
that is
right?
not true if they're there at the town hall, for example, for a town meeting. So what I'm suggesting is if we held an ethics committee training and multiple selectmen showed up, it does not make it a select person's
That is
meeting.
Agreed.
If they're,
So,
I thought you were talking about, like, if we brought them together, I'm like, no,
no,
no.
no, I'm talking about if we brought people together to do the training, we don't have to specify audience to get, you know. and
But
that
we
way-
all couldn't be there either then,
right,
No, it would be our meeting.
so we're recording it.
No, it's a training session, it's not a meeting where we're taking votes.
No,
There's
no,
no
no, she's-
business of the committee.
No, Eileen is right.
Yeah.
Well, I know, if the entire committee were present, that makes it a meeting, whether or
Yes.
not there's an agenda.
if you have
No.
more than two,
No, it depends.
If you haven't posted minutes in advance, if there's no agenda, if there's no business before the committee, it's not a committee meeting, just because you're all sitting in the same room.
we're
If we all go to
talking
Dunkin'
through
Talking
Donuts.
ethics.
if we're talking ethics with more than two people, that's quorum, it's a meeting.
If, I think if we're, I think that there's a distinction between, a discussion, that imports or imparts change versus a presentation of a training session. I think those are distinct, but it might be something to pass by the attorney.
Well, it's certainly possible for us to hold a training session with two people,
Sure.
and then it's not a meeting.
Yeah, that's one way to avoid it.
The other thing is, we've just talked through this, and it's been recorded, right? If we announce we're doing a dry run of it, and it is in our minutes, that's not the official recording, maybe?
If you want to do a dry run, as it were, before the formal presentation to the Board of Selectmen, assuming that's the route that we're going, then Wendy and someone else can do that at any time, any place, with any announcement, and it would not be recorded because it is not a meeting. She is doing a training session, and there are only two members
No,
of
I
the
would,
committee.
I would counter that with two ethics committee people could do a training. It doesn't have to be me, it could
No,
be
yeah,
Luke
no,
and
I
right,
understand. I
yeah,
was-
yeah, I know.
And-
Right.
And that would be the dry run.
So why don't we do this? Just to kind of bring us back. There are edits that have to happen. We have a meeting on 4/18.
18, yep.
We'll finalize the PowerPoint, right? And then decide the logistics of where we're gonna do a dry run and when we're gonna do a dry run. Sound fair?
That sounds fair.
Yep.
And everyone can think about what you think that should look like by next month,
After the eclipse.
after the eclipse, and before I leave for Austin. So, we're gonna do that meeting, and like the next day I'm leaving to go to Texas,
Oh,
so.
to Austin, that's a
Yeah.
fun town.
Yeah.
It's a fun town.
Right. So, all right, sound good? All right, do we have any other business for tonight? I forget, it's been a month. We vote to close the meeting, or can I just close it?
You can just close it.
I can, okay, so,
Stand adjourned.
all right, so we stand adjourned till September 18th?
September?
Yeah, there we go. April 18th. Okay. That was wishful thinking, we're taking the summer off.
Spring, we don't even have to do the training, because they said the training was in spring.
That's right.
That's right.
We're done.
Okay.
Is there any way I can get a copy of the article